Given your experience, do you look at politics differently? Do you say, you know, we spend a lot of time demonizing the other side, which put all of our supporters in the mindset of, you know what, they're not just wrong, they're evil.
Yeah, absolutely. If everything that a political adversary does is met with, you know, an attack that, oh my God, this is, you know, the worst possible thing you can imagine, this is dire, then when you face something that really is dire, like we are facing today with respect to Donald Trump and his efforts to unravel the republic, people become numb to the truth because they feel like, well, we've heard that so many times before from politicians.
War at home, war abroad. Is either one under control? The latest on the investigation. Congress passes a sweeping new anti-terrorism bill as the international hunt continues for the terrorists behind the September 11th attacks.
As an election denier has become Speaker of the House, and prominent Republicans have come to embrace election conspiracies as the route to political glory. You once used to say that nobody could challenge your conservative credentials. What if being a conservative today is defined by one thing, your support for Donald Trump?
Well, I know what conservative means, and I think that the most conservative of all conservative values is fidelity to the Constitution.
There comes a time in the history of nations when fear and complacency allow power to accumulate and liberty and privacy to suffer. That time is now, and I will not let the Patriot Act, the most unpatriotic of acts, go unchallenged. At the very least, we should debate. We should debate whether or not we are going to relinquish our rights or whether or not we are going to have a full and able debate over whether or not we can live within the Constitution or whether or not we have to go around the Constitution.
And for the source of the latest wave of bioterrorism. Congress, the White House, and the Pentagon have all been mighty busy this week. But what more do we know after a week of shifting messages concerning health, politics, and war? Today, the president signed a big new anti-terrorism bill that would expand the government's ability to track down terrorists, but at some cost. This is what the president had to say today.
If a person is a member of Congress and they've sworn an oath to defend the Constitution, can they defend the Constitution and also endorse Donald Trump?
No.
So
it's inconsistent.
They're breaking with their oath by saying they would like him to be the next president.
In my view, you know, fundamentally, there is a choice to be made. You can't both be for Donald Trump and for the Constitution. You have to choose.
This is a two-front war. It's a two-front war. And it's a war we're going to win on both fronts. But make no mistake, the best way to make sure we protect our homeland is to succeed by bringing the terrorists abroad who try to strike us to justice.
Barbara, what's in this new anti-terrorism bill that would presumably help investigators get to the bottom of all this?
Right. There's a lot in this bill.
It's a lot of people who are choosing Donald Trump.
Yeah, it is.
In the aftermath of the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol, Cheney was one of only 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach Donald Trump. Soon after, she joined the democratically led committee to investigate the attack.
Tonight, I say this to my Republican colleagues who are defending the indefensible. There will come a day when Donald Trump is gone, but your dishonor will remain.
The bulk collection of all Americans' phone records all of the time is a direct violation of the Fourth Amendment. The Second Appeals Court has ruled it illegal. The president began this program by executive order. He should immediately end it through executive order. For over a year now, he has said the program is illegal, and yet he does nothing. He says, well, Congress can get rid of the Patriot Act. Congress can get rid of the bulk collection, and yet he has the power to do it at his fingertips. He began this illegal program. The court has informed him that the program is illegal. He has every power to stop it, and yet the president does nothing.
I will work with Congress to pursue appropriate reforms to Section 215 of the Patriot Act, the program that collects telephone records. As I've said, this program is an important tool in our effort to disrupt terrorist plots, and it does not allow the government to listen to any phone calls without a warrant. But given the scale of this program, I understand the concerns of those who would worry that it could be subject to abuse. So after having a dialogue with members of Congress and civil libertarians, I believe that there are steps we can take to give the American people additional confidence that there are additional safeguards against abuse.
Attorney General John Ashcroft absolutely loves it. He said, the hour this thing is signed, I'm going to instruct law enforcement how to use these new powers. Some of them are being able to trace email messages from place to place, making it easier to surveil people for terrorist purposes, for intelligence purposes. One of the interesting things I think we're going to see that will immediately affect this investigation is the sharing of information between the intelligence gatherers, the CIA, the NSA, and other places, and the FBI. What they've done is they've lowered the wall between the two.
We know they've been spying on Carter Page and not following the FISA rules. How do we know that? Because Inspector General Horowitz has done 2 different audits, 2 different reports that he's given to us. 400 errors in 29 randomly selected FISA applications, 400 errors in 29 of them. In 4 of those 29 applications, there wasn't even a Woods file, which is the file you keep that has the underlying supporting evidence for the claims made in the application itself.
Which means, for example, as one high-level Justice Department person said yesterday, we have files. The intelligence people have files that they are ready to hand over to the criminal people. What that means is they can take that, and suddenly they have a lot of new leads.
And what's our Justice Department been doing? Not only ignoring the FISA rules, they don't even follow their own rules. We know that from a story 2 weeks ago, where in sensitive investigative matters, special cases dealing with First Amendment concerns when they're investigating religious groups, investigating candidates, and investigating government officials, or the press, 353 cases, 747 errors in those cases. Not only are they not following the FISA rules, they don't even follow their own darn rules. That's why we sent a letter asking for the internal audit. We hope that will be given to the Judiciary Committee, Mr. Chairman, so we can look at that.
She found an ally in then Speaker of the House California Democrat Nancy Pelosi.
I don't know that I had ever spoken more than a few sentences to her before she called me and asked me to be on the committee. I learned later that her staff put together for her a list of the top 10 worst things Liz Cheney has ever said about Nancy Pelosi.
Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker? Well, you know, when she first got in and was named Speaker, I met her, and I'm very impressed by her. I think she's a very impressive person. I like her a lot. But I was surprised that she didn't do more in terms of Bush and going after Bush. It just seemed like she was going to really look to impeach Bush and get him out of office, which personally I think would have been a wonderful thing.
Impeaching him?
Absolutely, for the war. For the war.
Because of the conduct of the war.
Well, he lied. He got us into the war with lies. And, I mean, look at the trouble Bill Clinton got into with something that was totally unimportant. And they tried to impeach him, which was nonsense. And yet Bush got us into this horrible war with lies, by lying, by saying they had weapons of mass destruction, by saying all sorts of things that turned out not to be true.
Cheney came to Washington in 2016, along with Donald Trump. Didn't like him, she said, but she supported his policies on issues like abortion and gun control. She voted with him more than 90% of the time.
Certainly, I think all of us in the Republican Party watched things unfold to some extent before 2020 and said, well, that's just Donald Trump. You don't have to take it seriously. I think what we saw that was different post-2020 election was the actual attempt to overturn the election and seize power.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Waters, arise?
Mr. Vice President, I rise to object to the fraudulent 25 Florida electoral votes.
Is the objection in writing and signed by a member of the House and a senator?
The objection is in writing, and I don't care that it is not signed by a member of the Senate.
The chair will advise that the rules do care.
So, Jennifer, we are to believe that an aide went to the House Speaker's office 3 years ago with what is widely being called an open secret in Washington, and that Denny Hastert never heard about it.
Right.
We have a toll-free number where people can confidently call, and we've reached out to experts around the country to put a system in place to make sure this never happens again.
Foley resigned his House seat in 2006 during a scandal over his sending salacious internet messages to male congressional teens. After the Palm Beach County Young Republicans group announced that Foley would be a guest speaker at an upcoming meeting, some took to Twitter to voice their concern. One person wrote, "This is disturbing," and asked the group's organizers, "Have you people lost your minds?"
Former House Speaker Dennis Hastert pleaded guilty Wednesday to a federal criminal charge connected to alleged hush money payments. By doing this, he is facing possible prison time, but avoiding a trial where more details of the case would become public.
For something like this to occur, our system obviously isn't designed for the electronic age of instant messages.
Here's a look at one of the most clicked on stories on Google. Paul Ryan has removed the portrait of former House Speaker Dennis Hastert from the Speaker's lobby outside the House floor.
These are pictures from when the portrait was unveiled in 2009. Last week, Hastert pleaded guilty to illegally structuring bank withdrawals in an effort to conceal hush money payments.
The tip number is 1-866-384-0481. We will do everything possible to make the program safe for the kids while they're in our care in Washington, D.C.
I was an information technology specialist, MLS code 25 Bravo in the U.S. Army, and for a few years I was stationed in the region beneath Pacific Command. During this time, my primary job was monitoring network traffic on what's known as SIPRNet, or the network for the DoD that is responsible for transmitting any level of classified information. So classified secret, top secret that was compartmentalized information. And that was the network where I, either early 2019 or late 2018, started to see a massive spike in abnormal communications between authorized users within Pacific Command to authorized users with IP addresses that I could recognize 100% of the time as belonging to Pentagon employees, either uniformed contractors, civilian employees, intelligence officials, something of that nature. And a lot of these communications were related to picking up underage
Nonetheless,
prostitutes.
the decision ultimately was made to hand over the records to a responsible media outlet, in this case ABC News in New York, without compensation and/or promises or guarantees of any sort. Even though ABC News is under no obligation whatsoever to me, I do expect their reporting to help identify potential witnesses for my defense. For me, this is an absolute necessity, since the government has placed me in the untenable position whereby I do not have sufficient monies to undertake this extraordinarily expensive task. Consequently, I would ask the press and the media to put aside the titillation of the who's who's list, at least in part, and instead investigate the disturbing genesis, the confounding evolution, and the equally alarming continuation of this matter. I believe there is something very, very rotten at the core of my circumstance, and without money to hire my own investigators, I must rely upon your acumen and talent here in the press and the media to uncover the truth.
I've had the story for 3 years. I've had this interview with Virginia Roberts. We would not put it on the air. First of all, I was told, who's Jeffrey Epstein? No one knows who that is. This is a stupid story. Then the palace found out that we had her whole allegations about Prince Andrew and threatened us a million different ways. We were so afraid we wouldn't be able to interview Kate and Will that also quashed the story. And then Alan Dershowitz was also implicated in it because of the planes. She told me everything. She had pictures. She had everything. She was in hiding for 12 years. We convinced her to come out. We convinced her to talk to us. It was unbelievable what we had. Clinton. We had everything. I tried for 3 years to get it on, to no avail, and now it's all coming out, and it's like these new revelations, and I freaking had all of it. I'm so pissed right now. Like, every day I get more and more pissed because I'm just like, oh my God, what we had was unreal. Other women backing it up. Hey, yep. Brad Edwards, the attorney, 3 years ago, saying there will come a day when we will realize Jeffrey Epstein was the most prolific pedophile this country has ever known. And I had it all 3 years ago.
Pentagon porn story began in 2006. An Immigration and Customs Enforcement child pornography sting operation called Project Flicker produced payment records of about 5,200 people, many of whom provided Army or Fleet zip codes or military email addresses. Subsequently, the Pentagon's investigative branch, DCIS, began going through the ICE list to identify who actually was a DoD employee or a contractor. The investigation, however, only ran for 8 months and only cross-checked some 3,500 names for Pentagon ties, according to a senator. According to DCIS documents revealed in a Freedom of Information Act request, out of that 3,500, investigators uncovered 264 employees or contractors, including staffers for the Secretary of Defense and contractors at the NSA. 9 people had top security clearances, but only about 20% of those 264 people were completely investigated. Fewer still were prosecuted, and after about 8 months, the entire probe was halted. It left about 1,700 names totally unchecked, 1,700 alleged kiddie porn customers, an unknown number of whom may still work in some capacity for the Defense Department.
But, you don't look at Denny Hastert and think Northern Illinois University. You don't look at him and think, the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. You look at him and think U.S. House of Representatives. He was the longest-serving Republican speaker in U.S. history. But so far as the U.S. House of Representatives is concerned, they, as an institution, have done nothing to distance themselves from Denny Hastert, other than taking down his picture. Literally, they took his portrait down in the hall, and that's it. The U.S. House of Representatives has the ability to censure both its members and its former members if they want to. It's not an everyday thing. Last time a former House member was censured was in the 19th century. It doesn't happen often. But then neither does Denny Hastert. He's the highest-ranking American elected official to have ever been sentenced to prison. He's the only high-ranking American official to have been sentenced to prison after admitting in open court to being a serial child molester. This Denny Hastert thing is not a run-of-the-mill former member of Congress gone bad thing. He was the longest-serving ever Republican Speaker of the House, and it was not that long ago that he was Speaker. But since he has been convicted and sentenced to prison and given a report date, even as all these other institutions in the country have taken steps to disassociate themselves from him and make clear where they stand in relation to Denny Hastert, Congress, the House of Representatives, has said beep, nothing, no reprimand, no censure. Are they really just going to let this go?
Were Deutsche Bank and J.P. Morgan bigwigs complicit in Jeffrey Epstein's abuse of young women? The attorney for Epstein's accusers make that claim in new legal filings. I'm Anjanette Levy, and welcome to Law and Crime's Sidebar podcast. The saga involving Jeffrey Epstein, it just seems like it's never, ever going away. Jeffrey Epstein, of course, is the convicted sex offender, but also a multimillionaire, maybe even a billionaire, who was accused by many women of treating them as sex slaves. So joining me to talk about these new claims being made in legal filings by the accusers of Jeffrey Epstein is Adam Klasfeld. He's the managing editor of lawandcrime.com and also the host of the Objections podcast produced by Law and Crime. So Adam, welcome back to Sidebar. Thanks for coming on. These are some pretty explosive allegations, but maybe not totally surprising if you've been following this case because, Jeffrey Epstein is somebody who mingled with royalty, who mingled with former presidents. So it's not shocking for us to hear that possibly there were bigwigs with these big banks who may have known about what was going on with him.
All right, at 6:32, breaking overnight, an FBI raid with big implications for a Florida doctor, and this investigation centers on West Palm Beach, but we're learning of alleged ties to senators. Katie Johnson has more from the scene.
Well, we are right outside of the Vitreoretinal Consultants Eye Center here in West Palm Beach, which belongs to Dr. Salomon Melgen. According to the Miami Herald, Melgen owes the IRS millions of dollars, despite the fact that he donated hundreds of thousands to several politicians. FBI agents came here late last night and worked into the morning, searching through the office and taking away potential evidence. According to the Miami Herald, Dr. Melgen has an outstanding lien of more than $11 million to the IRS. But the report shows Melgen also donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to politicians. The doctor is also accused of providing Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey with underage prostitutes while on free trips to the Dominican Republic. Now, FBI agents at the scene overnight did not talk to any reporters, but we will be sure to check in with them later on this morning and today on this developing story. For ABC Action News, I'm Katie Johnson.
According to former New Jersey Boy Scout John Humphrey, that trouble started in 1972, just 12 years old, when he says his scoutmaster abused him.
I was abused over a period of 3 years, probably well over 200 times by my scoutmaster, who was also my assistant principal, my band leader, my soccer coach, and had unfettered access to me. So I stuffed it away in a place, and I never talked to anybody about it.
A painful secret he says he kept to himself until 2017.
It changes your life when you come out. I mean, it's cost me a job, income, the difficulty to maintain employment. Either because you get some domineering boss and you just want to tell them to jump in a lake, or you can't stay focused.
Now John is sharing his story in the harrowing new documentary on Hulu, Leave No Trace, a hidden history of the Boy Scouts.
Parents gave the Boy Scouts the most valuable thing they had, their children.
Shining a light on survivors of sexual abuse and a century-long scandal inside the Boy Scouts of America, the organization concealing that there were pedophiles in their ranks.
When the detective says he confessed to abusing you, I must have read the email 100 times.
Even with all that has been known about the Catholic Church's sexual abuse scandals, today's revelations about the historical role of Pope John Paul II in the elevation of a former archbishop accused of sexual abuse was stunning. A report from the Vatican found two popes either ignored, overlooked, or downplayed allegations when it came to taking tough action against Theodore McCarrick over 2 decades. Amna Nawaz has the story.
Judy, the 449-page report found that before John Paul II elevated Theodore McCarrick to Archbishop of Washington, he already was aware of multiple allegations against McCarrick. That included reports of sexual misconduct with another priest, sharing beds with seminarians, and anonymous letters accusing him of pedophilia with his nephews. But McCarrick denied those allegations, and he rose to become one of the most powerful and well-known Catholic leaders in the United States. The investigation also found that Pope Benedict delayed an investigation into McCarrick's behavior, and that Pope Francis also did not act on allegations about McCarrick until 2017, believing that Pope John Paul II had already reviewed them. McCarrick was removed as Archbishop in 2006, but wasn't defrocked, that is to say removed from the church, until 2019.
Latest now on former Subway spokesman Jared Fogle, expected to plead guilty to charges of possessing child pornography. ABC's Alex Perez is in Indianapolis with the details. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning, George. Details is still developing, but the U.S. attorney could be here at the courthouse discussing possible charges in this case a little bit later today.
Hi, I'm Jared, the Subway guy.
Overnight, ABC News confirming Jared, the Subway guy Fogle, is expected to plead guilty to charges related to a child porn investigation. Subway quickly severing ties with Fogle following the news, tweeting, "We no longer have a relationship with Jared and have no further comment."
Gymnastics scandal. A longtime Team USA doctor now charged with sexual abuse, allegedly targeting multiple young gymnasts. And ABC's Paula Ferris is here with that story. Good morning, Paula.
Good morning to you, Amy. These sexual assault charges are rocking the gymnastics world. Larry Nasser was Team USA's doctor in 4 Olympics, treating the sport's biggest stars. And now the former Michigan State doctor is being called a monster and could spend the rest of his life behind bars.
This morning, Larry Nasser, a top sports doctor who treated Olympic athletes, is facing 22 criminal charges of sexual abuse.
Young women athletes who came to him for medical treatment. Instead, Dr. Nasser preyed on these young girls.
Joining us to discuss this, investigative journalist Ben Swan. So Ben,
the Pentagon already takes measures to limit worker access to stuff like porn by rolling out what they call the personal electronic device PED policy, where workers have to drop off their phones and lockers before entering their offices. All their online searches are accessible by security if or when needed. Their Wi-Fi access is monitored in digital security sweeps. So how is this happening?
Well, it's happening because even though there is a certain amount of limitation on access, those who are working in the Department of Defense, clearly it appears to be thousands of individuals in the Department of Defense, are finding ways around this, specifically by using the Department of Defense IP addresses and also apparently peer-to-peer sharing within the department's network. So this study that was done on this issue, and it is pretty horrifying, Manila, to consider this. It shows that the Department of Defense ranked 19th out of almost 3,000 networks in terms of peer-to-peer sharing of child pornography. That is absolutely incredible. This bill attempts to essentially say, look, we're not doing enough to stop it from coming in, but we're also not doing enough in the Department of Defense to go after those individuals who are being recognized as the ones who were perpetrating this.
So Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger is the co-author to this bill. She said this, quote, "The notion that the Department of Defense's network and Pentagon-issued computers may be used to view, create, or circulate such horrifying images is a shameful disgrace and one we must fight head-on."
Mr. President, the senator from Illinois says that Congress hasn't acted in 2 decades. That's true. I haven't been here for 2 decades. He has. There is no excuse to not take action now. There is no excuse to not act on this problem when we know what the solution is.